18 minutes. Across 20 nights, researchers studying a Hadza camp found only 18 minutes when everyone was asleep at the same time. Not 18 minutes per night, 18 minutes in total. Almost every other moment, somebody was awake, or moving enough to be recorded as active. So, did ancient humans deliberately guard their camps in shifts? And when they were awake, what were they actually doing? The answer may be stranger than an organized night watch. Different people simply slept at different times. A child stayed awake listening. A mother woke repeatedly. An older person rose before dawn. And before most people slept, there were hours of darkness to fill. Sunset was not necessarily bedtime. It was the beginning of a different part of human life. There was no universal Stone Age routine. A freezing night in Ice Age Europe was nothing like a warm night in East Africa. So the camp we are about to follow is not one real family from one known date. It is a plausible night assembled from archaeology, experiments, and observations of communities living without electric light. The details changed from place to place. The basic problem did not. Once the sun disappeared, humans had to make darkness usable. During the day, your attention stretches across the landscape. You watch tracks, clouds, animals, and people moving far away. At night, most of that information disappears. Your useful world shrinks to the small area illuminated by the fire. You can no longer study the horizon, so your attention shifts towards the voices and faces sitting beside you. That small change may have transformed what humans did after dark. Nobody needs to announce, "Your shift starts now." One person stays awake late. A parent wakes for a child. Somebody else is cold, uncomfortable, or disturbed by a noise. Older people often rise earlier than younger sleepers. In the Hadza study, differences in age and body clocks helped create overlapping periods of activity. The result looked like a night watch, even though no one had organized one. Being awake does not mean calmly looking at the stars. Beyond the fire, you cannot see what made that sound. Maybe it was the wind moving the grass. Maybe an animal passed far away. Maybe something is approaching the camp. Darkness forces the brain to guess. Most noises mean nothing, but one unusual sound can wake several people quickly. A camp does not need a perfect guard if it is almost never completely unresponsive. The fire is not a force field. Fuel has to be collected before dark. Wind can throw sparks towards bedding. Rain can weaken the flame. If the fire drops too low, the visible part of the camp becomes smaller. Someone still has to notice. Humans had not defeated darkness. They had created one small patch where darkness was less useful to anything approaching them. During daylight, conversation has immediate jobs to do. Where is the water? Which direction did the animals move? How should the food be divided? At night, many of those questions cannot be acted upon. You cannot follow tracks you cannot see. You cannot gather plants in total darkness. So people keep talking, but the subject begins to change. They discuss events that happened somewhere else, happened long ago, or may never happen at all. In one study of Zhu Hansi conversations, 81% of the longer nighttime discussions involving several people were devoted to stories. They spoke about known people, past events, relationships, and experiences beyond the camp. That does not give us a recording from 40,000 years ago, but it shows what can happen when fire gives people hours together, and the urgent work of daylight finally stops. A story about somebody misreading animal tracks can be funny, while quietly teaching everyone what dangerous tracks look like. A story about selfish behavior can show what the group will tolerate. A frightening memory can prepare younger listeners for a situation they have never faced themselves. Nobody needs to announce that a lesson is beginning. The listener remembers the person, the mistake, and what happened next. The knowledge travels inside the story. The child beside the fire can also hear about people who are not physically present, a relative living several days away, a conflict that began years earlier, someone who died before the child was born. The camp may contain only a few dozen people, but storytelling gives it a much larger social world. Darkness removes the distant landscape from view, while conversation brings distant people back into the circle. This does not mean every evening became a grand ceremony about the meaning of life. People joked, sang, gossiped, and argued. Children interrupted. Someone repeated a story everybody had already heard. Somebody probably fell asleep halfway through it. That ordinary enjoyment is part of why stories worked. People stayed, listened, and remembered because the evening did not feel like a classroom. Around the conversation, ordinary work continued. Food sat near the coals. Someone repaired a tool needed the next morning. Sleepers lay close together, on vegetation, animal skins, or whatever material was available. At Border Cave in South Africa, people were preparing grass bedding at least 200,000 years ago. The prehistoric night was not comfortable by modern standards, but people were actively arranging the space, rather than simply collapsing wherever they stood. Eventually, the child who was listening closes their eyes. The conversation becomes quieter. Later, the mother wakes again. Somewhere else in the camp, another sleeper turns over, coughs, or sits upright. There is no dramatic handover, and nothing announces that the group has entered a new phase. People simply move in and out of sleep, while the night continues around them. Some ancient humans did something even more unsettling. They carried fire away from the camp. Imagine walking until the familiar glow disappears behind you, then entering a cave where moonlight cannot follow. Every step forwards increases the distance you must travel back, and the only thing separating you from complete darkness is a flame made from wood, resin, or animal fat. 41 minutes of light. Experiments based on Paleolithic evidence have tested wooden torches, portable fat lamps, and small fireplaces. Torches were useful while moving, but they smoked, dropped embers, and required attention. In one experiment, they burned for an average of about 41 minutes. That sounds like plenty of time, until you remember that some of those 41 minutes must be saved for finding the way out. What the flame revealed. Deep inside some caves, that moving light revealed painted and engraved animals. People carried fuel and materials into places with no natural light, then returned to particular walls and chambers. We do not know exactly what every visit meant. Teaching, ceremony, storytelling, and specialized work are all possibilities. What survives is the effort. Humans used valuable light to make darkness hold something worth returning to. Back at the camp, the child is still asleep. The younger person who stayed awake late has not moved, but an older member of the group is already sitting upright. They push a branch into the embers and listen as the first light appears. There was no moment when the entire camp switched off, and there is no single moment when everyone wakes. Dawn arrives, person by person. So what did ancient humans do at night? They worked a little longer, they cared for children, they maintained the fire, moved in and out of sleep, and listened for anything approaching the camp. But they also laughed, argued, and told stories about people and places beyond the light. Near the end of the night, most of the camp is asleep. One person is still listening to the darkness, while a child beside them sleeps through the end of a story. Somebody is awake, and the darkness is never completely empty.